First, I'd like to express my gratitude to the board members for granting me the opportunity to address this important issue that's significantly impacting the lives of countless patients in Missouri and across our nation. I established Unite for Safe Medications after my son's life was put at risk due to mail-order pharmacy. This is a picture of my son. This is from the time 2.5 months after he received his liver transplant that they shipped his medication. I decided to try mail-order pharmacy, and they shipped his medications on a hot day without protection. It was liquid world transplant medications. You'll see on his wrist, there's a bruise on his wrist from where they would make multiple attempts of trying to insert the IV. At one point, I would have to hold my son down for almost 2 hours as they would try to insert a PICC line to give him harsher chemo medications because the medications that he got from the mail-order pharmacy was not working. It's important to note that today I'm not receiving any compensation for being here today. I'm sacrificing my work hours, which will have a significant financial impact on my family. However, I believe that being here is crucial because whenever you uncover a grave issue that strikes at the core of pharmaceutical care and your child's life relies on medications every 12 hours, there is nowhere else that I would rather be than right here today. Most of you are familiar with my story, so I'm not going to go in too great a detail, but I'm here before you today because I've discovered that the temperature which mail-order pharmacies handle medications is left unregulated. And after learning this the hard way, I initially, I was concerned about the outside temperatures, but little did I know that the trucks and mailboxes can reach temperatures as high as 170 degrees. As his mom, I did everything on my part to save my child's life and to protect him. But patients and mothers like me were not warned that there are no regulations governing the temperatures of mail-order pharmacies. The lack of regulation particularly affects not just the medications like the refrigerated medications, the medications that are more temperature sensitive, but room temperature medications like the ones that my son took, those are temperature sensitive too at some point. These medications are often subjected to days of extreme temperatures during the journeys across the United States. After starting a petition with 220,000 supporters now to stop the mandatory use of mail-order pharmacies, I quickly realized that my son was not the only victim of this issue. Currently, patients only become aware of the problem when their medications fail to work properly or they don't work at all. Currently, patients only, I apologize. This was the case for my son, as well as Cheryl, a diabetic who received frozen insulin. I came across the story of another child who was hospitalized, starving to death because her enzymes, vital for survival, were rendered ineffective due to the improper temperature storage. This was reported by NBC. A doctor also discovered that one of his patients with high blood pressure ended up in the hospital after his high blood pressure medications were exposed to high temperatures. I could spend all day sitting here telling you the many stories that I've heard from patients, but I know most of you already know, because whenever I speak to boards and other pharmacists, they tell me they know this is an issue, and many even cite their own bad experiences related to this. Doctors, they're not informed that they should consider the temperatures of which medications are stored when a patient's conditions worsen. Everyone assumes that someone is regulating this matter, especially since many are forced to mail-order pharmacies owned by the insurance companies. It's assumed that mail-order pharmacies would not neglect the lives of the patients that they serve. Unfortunately, these assumptions are wrong. In reality, no one is safeguarding patients from the harm or protecting their life-saving medications from chemical changes caused by temperature extremes. I'll never forget the time that I contacted the FDA along with the specialty pharmacists from the pharmacy that filled my son's prescriptions, the U.S. Department of Labor. They all told me, you're not the only one. We receive a lot of calls like yours, and every summer, every winter, sometimes people's insulin is just left sitting unprotected in their mailboxes. At the beginning of this summer, I reached out to the FDA once again, and this was because whenever I spoke in Oklahoma, a CVS lobbyist who spoke against the regulation states that they receive medications that are already warm or hot, making it difficult for pharmacists, their own pharmacists at their mail order pharmacies, to tell their pharmacists, you cannot ship these medications out without protection. So they're like, well, we're receiving them hot. How can we tell our own pharmacists not to do it? So I reached out to FDA asking them for help. Again, the FDA would tell me they get calls like this in the middle of every summer and every winter. The FDA also said that CVS should also be reporting the violations and not further sending out those medications. This is what the FDA said in writing, and I apologize, I will send this to the board because I just got this on Monday. But the FDA believes that including a temperature excursion statement on the product label is sufficient to inform healthcare providers, including state licensed retail mail order pharmacies, about the need to ensure appropriate packaging and transportation with temperature control mechanisms within permitted ranges. The FDA recommends reporting violations of good distribution practices by state licensed pharmacies, including mail order pharmacies, to the respective state boards of pharmacy or through the FDA's MedWatch reporting program. The FDA consistently tells me that the state boards of pharmacy are the ones that are supposed to be regulating this issue. The FDA acknowledges that medication should not be stored above the 86 degrees Fahrenheit under the improper conditions. In the document that was sent, it also has the 86 degrees, the excursions permitted 86 degrees. That's what state boards of pharmacy, the mail order pharmacy, should be adhering to. USP General Chapter 659 also recognizes that medication should not be subjected to extreme temperatures beyond 2 times room temperature. The sole reason we, as parents, are forced to jeopardize our children's lives, and patients are forced to jeopardize their lives and risk their lives, is the lack of regulation by our state boards of pharmacy and legislative failures. As patients and mothers to children, we are lacking the right to simply protect and ensure the safety of medications that we give our children, as many of us are forced to use mail order pharmacies as the only option of coverage. As patients and caregivers for our children, we say enough, enough. It is no longer acceptable for patients to continue taking these risks. Many of you on this board have been aware of this issue longer than I have. Many of you remember when this issue was raised 20 years ago, and you witnessed the pharmacy benefit managers, the PBMs, and mail order pharmacies convince the boards, especially NABP, to turn their backs on patients like my son and many others. We have noticed the close relationships that some board members have with mail order pharmacy lobbyists. And I'm just going to ask you today to leave that at the door and leave the profits, any desire for profits at the door, because today this is about patients and patient safety. Current regulations regarding medication shipments by mail are currently, the regulations that we have are just words on paper. As room temperature medications are being shipped in just flimsy bags across the country in trucks and mailboxes that reach up to 170 degrees. Allow me to illustrate the failure of the board to take any action based on my own complaint. It was my son's medication that was shipped on a day when the temperatures were around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. My UPS driver even mentioned how hot it was in the back. He said, "It's so hot I can't breathe back there," where his medications were stored. The boards were well aware the life-saving medications for our children and patients were exposed to temperatures between 120 to 170 degrees in these trucks. The boards, just like the patients in the mail order pharmacies, they cannot say if it's safe for patients to take. There's no temperature sensor on the package. No one's tracking the exact temperatures of the vehicle or the mailbox. Any formula that the mail order pharmacies are currently using is faulty and properly ensuring safe temperatures. Very few, if any, manufacturers, especially those producing generic medications, would claim that it's safe to store medications at such high temperatures without protection. Valisher, drug testing experts whose CEO discovered an increase in impurities in room temperature medications when exposed to the high temperatures such as those exposed to during shipping, stated that his finding was just the tip of the iceberg. He goes on to say that the various chemical reactions that can occur when drugs are exposed to such high temperatures, many of them are still unknown. As a patient, I don't want to take that risk of the unknown, and it is beyond unethical to allow these corporations to allow and force patients to take these risks. Mail order pharmacies cannot be trusted to address this issue on their own. They've allowed this to go on long enough. The only thing that they care about are profits. And it's not only the PBM's pharmacies that are properly storing medications. I know that there are others doing this as well. But this profiting off of improper temperature storage should have never been allowed in the first place. So it's time to do what we should have done 20 years ago. 20 years ago with Del Connor, who was the president of PICMA, he was being interviewed by multiple reporters. And every time the reporters would question him about patients who were receiving faulty medications, he just kept saying, "Oh, I've never heard of any complaints." Well, I found multiple accounts of him getting multiple complaints and saying the same thing. And it's just not going to work anymore. It's time to work towards ensuring that the proper storage of medications in that last mile, and hopefully eventually throughout the entire supply chain. We cannot allow for patients to only be able to determine if their medications are safe to take when they end up in the hospital or experience diminished effectiveness. This is not how things should be. Every package should be equipped with a temperature sensor that alerts patients when their medications could have been exposed to extreme temperatures, both hot and cold. For example, 8 ice packs may be suitable for insulin in Texas during November, but it's unreasonable when those same packages are transported from Texas to Michigan, resulting in frozen, ineffective insulin due to extreme cold. As Jackson, a student from Oklahoma State University, pointed out, even with ice packs, these packages that are supposed to be cold can reach temperatures of up to 90 degrees during the summer. He aptly stated, it's a flawed system. Room temperature medications are just as important and should not be left exposed to extreme temperatures of 120 to 170 degrees. They require equal regulation and attention. Timely delivery of medications in 2023 should not take days. Penalties should be imposed when medications are shipped under these conditions for several days or even over a week. Every day, Amazon packages containing stocks receive higher priority than life-saving medications. Of all packages containing medications should have the highest priority. In America, those corporations that harm Americans want to force us to these risky mail-order pharmacies without any regulation or accountability. Every delay and interruption in treatment should carry consequences. The harshest fine should be imposed on mail-order pharmacies that fail to store medications safely and risk lives with delays, especially when they force patients to use their own mail-order pharmacies. In addition to raising awareness about the importance of proper temperature storage, patients must know where to file complaints. The board's contact information should be provided on every package sent to patients. Some patients, today they're told that they can only file a complaint after experiencing harm. That's not okay. The harm for patients like my son can be a slow decline over weeks before the issue is caught. And I just want to go back to my son. Whenever he went through rejection, I got the call from the nurse saying his labs were off. I'm like, are you sure? Because my son, he looks fine. Like, he's acting fine. She's like, Lorenzo, I need to remind you of how quickly decline can happen. And although my son looked great, he was in transplant rejection. Just because patients don't show immediate harm doesn't mean that they're not harmed by these medications. And after my son ingests these for weeks or months, or patients are ingesting these medications, your condition may not worsen that day. It may be months that you see the repercussions. And today we have no way of knowing when conditions worsen if it's from the improper shipping. So some states, I'm not sure if this is our state, Missouri, but if so, this is something I would also like to be considered. So some are instructed to file complaints by fax or mail. I hope that in 2023 that we can ensure that patients have a faster electronic method that is more accessible for patients to voice their concern. Some of the board members present here have served on this board for an extensive period of time, driven for the concern for patient safety and the well-being of individuals like my son. The issue we are addressing here today is the basics to pharmaceutical care, and it shouldn't be this challenging to resolve. However, it's only become difficult because, like many other issues affecting pharmacy today, we've allowed this issue to persist for far too long. Bad actors have been able to jeopardize patients' lives without any accountability, using us solely and patients solely as profits. You have been aware of this issue for an extended period of time, and you have likely been told that this is just an insurmountable problem, that you cannot do anything. But today I urge you to recognize not only can it be resolved, it will be, it must be. For the sake of our children's lives and for the advancements of pharmaceutical care and safety. In closing, and most importantly, whatever you choose to do today, I hope that you will ask yourself this question. Would this regulation alert moms like Loretta and her child that her child's room temperature medication would be unsafe to give her child prior to giving it to him? We cannot let conditions worsen and other harmful side effects occur as the only way to alert moms like me that there's a problem. Lastly, when I spoke at the Oklahoma Board of Pharmacy, there was a hero pharmacist on the board who voted in support of the regulations. The regulation that you're reviewing from Oklahoma most likely wouldn't be in your hands today without the heroic efforts of every brave pharmacist on that board. I'll never forget saying the last time I spoke that you're leaving behind a legacy for others to follow. And it wasn't long after that that one of the board members had passed away. And today, he's leaving behind a legacy because I know that you all have Oklahoma's regulations in your hands and you're looking at those. And I'm going to ask you today to pass on his legacy, to pass on your legacy, to live it out in a good way and do what's right and do the same thing. Put patients first above the profits of these billion-dollar corporations. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Do any board members have any questions?
Christian Service. Thanks for making the presentation. I've heard it a couple times now, and I appreciate your passion. It's certainly an important topic in our industry, and I appreciate you noting increasingly that it is a very complex topic given supply chain in general. I have two questions for you, if you could maybe just expand a little bit on that. You're making a fairly broad statement about all mail-order pharmacies. Are you aware of these? Is it everybody, or is it just a few actors that maybe don't have a good process in place from your perspective, given the people you're talking to, where your information's coming from? Because many boards do have regulations in place that expect the pharmacies they license to ensure the supply chain and cold chains maintained, things like that. So I just want to ask, is it just a few pharmacies that you run into that are problematic, or is it a blanket statement?
Unfortunately, I would say it is a blanket statement. Even the smaller mail-order pharmacies, this is an issue for. I haven't seen any pharmacies that are properly storing medications throughout the normal, channels as far as with UPS, USPS, FedEx. Even with the ice packs and coolers, it can still be an issue. And that's why it's important that these patients have something to alert them that, hey, your medication could be unsafe to take. So I think even with the pharmacies with cold chain, they're trying, it's still a faulty system and it's not working the way that it should for patients.
And my second question really gets into the challenge of it being out of the hands of the pharmacies, right? These courier services or whatever mechanism the pharmacy might use to deliver their patient, and how the patient handles it afterwards upon receipt. Boards of pharmacies typically don't regulate or have any influence over those organizations and ultimately the patient's handling of the medication. Do you have any suggestions on what we might want to consider or how we approach that? How the board impact that or be able to control those factors when it's outside the pharmacist's hands?
The Board of Pharmacy has the duty to ensure that patients are protected. That is your responsibility, and I feel like the boards of pharmacy need to ensure. We have pharmacies that can deliver safely. There are smaller pharmacies that offer temperature controlled delivery. They have the capability to deliver medication safely. They're just choosing not to because it's profits first. We need to ensure that medications are stored properly from the time they're manufactured really to the patient's doorstep. When they ingest it, that medication needs to be safe to take. I understand that the boards don't only regulate the pharmacies, regulate the mail order pharmacies, and they do have the ability to ensure that there is proper temperature control from the point that the mail order pharmacy ships the med out to the patient's door. It would be unacceptable for the board to do any less.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
This is Senator Perry, and I'm a public member. I am not a pharmacist, so I can certainly appreciate your concern for the public. I have just a couple of questions. How many other boards have you visited or made presentations to?
So Florida was one that did nothing more other than put a phone number, required the phone number on the package. It said that $1 would be too much for the temperature sensor. I have visited Oklahoma, Texas. I spoke at the NABP meeting. We have patients who even over the weekend have told me that they want to take this issue up to their boards. Sadly, I'm just one person, and I'm trying to do this major thing because and we have a lot of support from patients, but sadly there's patients that are extremely sick, and sadly they're the ones that are really coming. They're the ones showing up. It's the caregivers that have some of the children with the most chronic issues and the patients with the most chronic issues that are seriously coming and willing to speak and share their stories because the pharmacists are afraid of retaliation. I know that some of the board members here today are probably afraid of some type of retaliation if they do what's right for us. We do have supportive pharmacists both within the PBMs that say, hey, I know this is an issue and I want to help you. I had the CVS pharmacists say, in Texas, say, hey, we're getting medications from this site that is, unsafe. They're shipping them in USPS trucks that, from, I believe they said, a Central Fill location, where in Texas a worker had just died from the hot trucks. So it's going to keep growing. We have Arizona next month. We'll be there. I had someone reach out from a large organization for patients with a certain chronic condition that wants to also help us in Arizona.
I've got another question. Do you receive notification that the meds have been shipped? I used to get my meds from a mail order.
Yeah.
But I always got the email saying it's shipped and a tracking number and all that other good information that if this was just pills and it didn't have to be refrigerated or anything.
Yeah.
So did you ever get notifications that the prescription had been shipped?
Yeah. I'll tell you about that. So my son actually did, the first time I tried mail order pharmacy, we did get the notification that his medication had been shipped. We got the notification that had been delivered. And I looked outside where they had delivered my son's medication and where they would typically deliver packages. It wasn't there. I would walk around the house. I didn't see it. So I called them and I said, hey, it's showing it's delivered, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. And they're like, oh, well, sometimes they mark it delivered, but it may not come until tomorrow. The next day came. It's nowhere to be found. The delivery driver didn't even stop. And I called them back and they're like, oh, it shows it was delivered yesterday. And I start walking around again and I see it sitting in a very odd place between like two window panes. on our screen porch, which usually is not where anyone would leave a package. So there's a lot of issues with the tracking. It's helpful, but it's not enough because my son's medication also, it was a room temperature medication, which is often left out of a lot of the safe packaging requirements. And I want to just urge the board to not water down Oklahoma's regulations, because those regulations are truly life-saving and really detail how to safely package medications.
Do you know if the Oklahoma bill is passed or if they're doing something with it? Is it active?
Yeah, so in Oklahoma, my understanding is that because just like Missouri boards, it does say that the medication should be stored within USP drug manufacturers guidelines, and that's a great statement if they actually went by it. If they went by it though, in Missouri on a 100-degree day, no packages would be shipped in only a bag in a non-temperature controlled truck. It just wouldn't happen. So basically what happened in Oklahoma, they said, well, you're basically just defining, how this regulation would look. So they thought they would have to take it to the legislators to get approval. My understanding is that they will not have to, because they're really just defining more about, how they're going to meet that requirement. And I really do feel like that needs to be defined for the Miller pharmacies, because too many won't do it on their own.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other board members have comments or questions?
My name's Toby Grove. I have a couple questions. You said that they have, the Delaware pharmacies have the means to do safe packaging. What are some examples of those safe packaging?
Well, when it comes to safe packaging, the number one thing for patients' safety is ensure that there's a temperature sensor that will alert them, whether or not that medication has either become too hot or too cold. That is a start. That's like the basics of ensuring that a package of medications has not reached outside those temperature extremes. Again, the coolers and the ice packs, they're sometimes they work, but they're not 100%. We know that there are issues there. Temperature controlled vehicle is definitely helpful. We see some momentum gaining there with UPS, USPS to start air conditioning those vehicles. I do believe that's going to happen. I believe that, we're 20 years behind on this issue just because the boards have overlooked it so long. But innovation will come along with regulation. And if the board would even take some steps towards the right direction, we could get there faster and ensure a safer supply chain for our children.
Then have you seen, since you've started this, have you seen any Delaware companies make changes or try to make things better, or maybe fonts in size?
Sadly, I have not. I do see a little bit more of prescription delivery services being offered, almost like Uber-style prescription delivery. But I still think it's just so important that patients get to maintain that relationship with their pharmacists too, and that those pharmacies that are delivering medication properly, that those are prioritized.
Anybody from the public have any questions or comments? I'm sorry. Any public comments, questions? How about anybody who's attending virtually?
They can enter it in the chat box if you can, but I understand they are having sound issues online. If you have a comment or would like to speak, please raise your hand. We'll try to work that out. Kim, is your main computer muted?
Yeah, they said there was no static when it was on, when I was on mute, but
So, is it off mute now?
They said get out. So members of the public, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add, the floor is open. Please either raise your hand or enter something in the chat box.
Could possibly.
Looks like Sam has his hand raised.
Sam?
Yes.
Okay.
Sam, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes.
Sam,
Yes,
can
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. If I'm not mistaken, this audio was fairly poor during her presentation. Maybe we need to start testing the public microphones as well. But I think this is the same story we heard about a year ago. And I agree that, there are some things that need to be done to help get this, but I understand one of the cruxes of the information that she provided back then was when the pharmacy reached out to the manufacturer for the stability at those temperatures, that they refused to provide it because it was proprietary information. And even if we enact rules on the pharmacies to follow to, try to control their cold chain or their warm chain shipments, there's nothing we can do if we don't have that information from the manufacturers. So I have a colleague that has worked with the Oklahoma Board of Pharmacy, and she gave me the complete set of rules and some of the meeting notes as they were developing their rule. I don't know that it's in effect yet, but they did have a qualification testing requirement where the pharmacies would have to ship certain products. I don't know if it was the hottest day of the year or the coldest day of the year, but they had warm and hot testing. I don't know if it was just one time or ship it 3 times during the predicted hottest week or the predicted coldest week, but we need to have, if that information is available, add it to any rule language that goes in, and then we need to actually flush out the qualification testing for these qualified packaging systems. Because I think there's a lot of harm that can be done, especially with biologics, but there are a ton of medicines that don't require it. But as I understand from the Oklahoma rule, that once you qualify and test your system, you don't have to you don't have to monitor every package. You just have to make sure the system works in the hottest and the coldest shipping environments, and then your system is used from that point on. You don't have to actually send out monitors with each and every shipment. That's really all I got.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And again, please either raise your hand or drop a comment in the chat box. Don't see any other hands right now. Okay.
Okay. If there's no other questions, well, thank you for that presentation.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Any more discussion? I mean, I think it's clear to this board that temperature and stability of drugs is critical for patient care.